Thank you for joining us today. Transforming your corporate legal department with AI and Legisway will begin shortly. For the best viewing experience, please close any unnecessary programs or browsers, clear your browser cache, and make sure you have a strong internet connection. Before the presentation begins, please be aware, the audio for this webcast is through the internet only. Please use headphones or listen to this presentation through your laptop or mobile speakers. Also, this is a one-way communication channel. You can hear us, but we cannot hear you. If you have any questions, please be sure to use the Q&A widget. If you look around your screen, there are multiple widgets for your use. The first widget you'll see is Help, which can help if you are having audio issues or slides aren't advancing. The Slides widget displays the PowerPoint presentation. This and all the windows can be customized and resized to your preference. The media player plays the audio and video, including today's presentation. The next widget you'll see is Q&A. You can use this button to type in any technical questions. For content-related questions, we'll do our best to answer them in the Q&A during the presentation. To learn more about today's presenters, click the speaker bio. Resources provides handouts including slides and supplemental material on today's topic. Without further ado, I am now pleased to hand the presentation over to Greg German. Greg?
Thank you, Daniel. Welcome to our Legisway webinar. We're excited to spend some time with you reviewing how AI and Legisway can transform a legal department. My name is Greg German. I am a senior consultant and product specialist with Legisway US, and I've been working with corporate legal departments over the last 8 years, helping them implement Legisway, provide training, support, and best practices. I'm joined by my colleague Hugo Seymour, who is the head of AI and legal software. Today, we would like to explore and highlight a few areas of our focus today, really looking at kind of the landscape of AI's evolution, learning about the AI challenges and benefits when it comes to our corporate legal department clients and folks that we engage with, and then of course take a deeper dive in kind of discuss the practical AI applications of Legisway. When exploring the landscape of AI's evolution, it can be broken down into a few things, such as adoption of the deep learning or the machine learning techniques in all sorts of applications. Let it be legal applications or even CRM applications out there. I remember many solutions that advertised, IBM Watson and things of that nature in the early 2010s. And, these functions, these features, these enhancements have continued to grow over time, computational power, larger data sets, all kind of really focused and push that kind of revolution forward. Now, as far as AI today, in terms of legal departments, I see it, contract review, legal research, compliance, really focused on improving efficiencies and accuracy of the data. I really enjoy seeing kind of that landscape and where it's going, but there are some considerations for corporate legal departments, surrounding concerns about bias in the algorithm, decision making, and kind of the impact of automation for legal professionals. I never want to say that it's going to fix or kind of streamline and automatically do anything, but I will say that it's going to change the landscape and really drive efficiencies. Now, as we kind of look toward the future, I see a lot of developments, in explainable AI to enhance transparency, accountability, as well as efforts to kind of mitigate any kind of bias or, kind of fairness in all sorts of AI systems that are coming down the pipeline. Now, as we look at this slide here, I see a lot of information I get a lot of information from Gartner. And last year they published the Hype Cycle for Emerging Technologies. And it's really focused on AI, and it illustrates kind of maturity or adoption and the social application of AI. There are 5 phases. I think we're really kind of at the peak of things, and we'll talk about what each of these phases means. But the innovation trigger is really something that jumped out at me, is really where we conceptualize what AI technologies can do. It really sparked all that interest, that driver, and a lot of the research that we've seen over the last few years. The peak of Inflated expectations is where I see us now. A lot of media hype surrounding AI, which leads to maybe unrealistic expectations on what it can do, what it can't do, what it can and can't do. And we see all of those references today. I think one of the big pieces that's coming down the line is, the trough of disillusionment. Some of the phases are interestingly named, but I do see that, this could be, inflated expectations leading to uncertainty or setbacks to maybe adoption of it. And then as we work further down the line here, the slope of enlightenment really is, understanding what AI can really do, leading to applications in different areas. And then, of course, the plateau is folks really understanding what AI is, how it helps, and then integrating into all the different industries, all the different parts of your organization. Now, as AI evolves, there would be hurdles for any kind of deployment, but the benefits are greater for the early adopters. Those early adopters are going to be able to understand where it is, what it does, and then apply it in all the different areas of their business. Now, I want to hand it over to Hugo to kind of really talk about the direction that he sees coming up.
Yeah, so thank you, Greg. I think it's probably good just to kind of tap into that hype whilst it lasts for a little bit longer, just to make sure that we've got a bit of a sense of what people are actually getting excited about. So there's a few things here that Greg's alluded to and that I'm going to get into a bit more detail. The first piece of this is how much money and brainpower is actually being thrown at this. We've gone from a scenario 4 years ago, back when this revolution really started off with the birth of the language model kind of paradigm, where if you could get it to look at a couple of sentences, you were doing well. That was the state of the art, and let alone having it kind of generate text. Now we're at a stage where you can feed entire books in and it will give you sensible kind of answers about what's going on in those books. So that's a huge expansion of, firstly, the amount of compute that's available, secondly, the amount of training that's been done, and thirdly, just the amount of context, and we'll get around to this in a second, that these models can look at one moment. That kind of evolution is also moving into what we call multimodality. We're no longer just looking at text. We're looking at combinations of text and images. Some of you might have played with the image generators where you can ask for a silly scene and it will produce it. And we're beginning to see video and, as of earlier this week, some really high quality music generation coming out as well. So this is fun. It's good for kind of playing with or maybe producing some promos, but the deeper part of what's going on is that the world model, the understanding of, or at least modeling of how the model, of how these models deal with reality is improving. And it's improving not just with text, it's improving with other things as well. So what does this mean that we're doing? Well, the other thing that we're keeping a close eye on is not just, Anthropic's Claude or GPT-4 or GPT-4.5 from Microsoft. We're also keeping an eye on what's going on inside the open source domain because, and I had to update these slides only a couple of days ago, Meta have just produced Llama 3. And what's happening is that we're seeing the open source community, the stuff that we can download off the internet for free, is keeping pace with those private labs. We're making sure that we can have an idea of how those big models work, and Mistral from France and Mixtral, which is a mixture of experts model. That gets me excited, probably doesn't do much for anyone else here. But again, that cutting, that bleeding edge stuff is available and testable for us, which is really exciting. The other thing that's going on is we're not just focusing on let's use a bigger model with more parameters, more electricity, more kind of water going through it. We're beginning to think about different paradigms of this sort of stuff. And that's quite helpful because at the moment, I, for one, and many others, kind of treat these things as a bit of magic. And when we're building these things, one of my product managers says, well, okay, let's just call it magic. And that probably gets you most of the way there when you're describing how these things work. But we're moving to slightly different ways of using these models, and I'll get into this in a little bit. And that's quite a helpful way of thinking about some of these techniques and making sure that we don't get too far up the hype cycle. So what's going on? Well, as we said, these models are increasingly capable at wide scale, if you're running server farms filled with computers and information. What's more interesting in some ways for me is actually what's going on the micro scale. And again, a demonstration of how fast this stuff is moving. I didn't have time to update this one as Microsoft released a new version of Phi. You might not have heard of it, but this is a slightly different approach. Instead of trying to hoover up every single piece of information ever written on the internet and then use seemingly unlimited computers, they're having a go at seeing what happens if we take a smaller amount of information that's really high quality and train very specifically on that. And what you get isn't one of these giant models. It's something that's much more focused and can do stuff that's been exposed to really, really well. In this case, mainly focusing on maths and coding. Math and coding. I ought to bear my audience in mind as an Englishman. So the question here, and it's an unanswered one as far as I'm concerned, is how can we use not just one of these models, but probably a constellation of these models to make this as efficient as possible? Because, and I don't know if anyone's done a bit of experiments, but using these big models at the scale that we're going to have to do so for small, medium, and enterprise-sized clients, those bills add up pretty quickly. And it's been a while since I was a lawyer, but it's rare that I'm told, yes, we want you to spend more time and money on this. So we need to make sure that we're delivering stuff that is cost-efficient, cost-effective, and appropriate for the risk levels that folks want to take on. So this is what we're trying to focus on, making sure that we're producing stuff that works in the way and with the accuracy that you expect, without exposing everyone to the large bills that I'm upsetting my internal colleagues with. So I promised to start people thinking about a slightly different paradigm, and I apologize. One of the first rules whenever you're giving a presentation is don't put too much text on, don't make it complicated, and don't use too many arrows. So I've broken every single one of those rules comprehensively here, but I think this could be quite helpful. Some of you who've looked at these models might have discovered that they're not very good at some things. One of the key things is that they're not up to date with current events. And that's because you have to spend an awful lot of time and a very large amount of money training the big models. So that means you do it not every week, you do it every 6 to 8 months or so, because if a training run costs 10 to 20 and even more $1 million, you're going to be pretty careful about it. But that means they're not very good at new things. And the example that we've got on the slide here is the defenestration of Sam Altman as the CEO of OpenAI. And we can see the way that this traditionally works with a language model. We've got a user, and hopefully my pointer is appearing on the relevant part of the screen here. They have a query. They're asking about the evaluation of Sam Altman being fired from OpenAI for a brief period. That then goes to the model, and we can see it's frozen here. And the traditional models will say, I don't know what you're talking about, boss. This is outside of anything that I saw when I was trained on it. So instead, what we do is a slightly different technique, and this is called retrieval augmented generation. So let's imagine that we are working on something that's dealing with news sites. What we can do is take our documents, in this case, the news stories, slice them up into bits. So you've got kind of meaningful paragraphs about Sam Altman, about the pay battle, about the people that were basically briefing different media outlets at vicious speed. And that means that what you can do is you can take this query here and then ask it to pull out bits that are relevant from your giant store of documents. So instead of it going, I'm not sure, boss, when you ask this question, it can take the elements from your store of relevant documents, add those together with the query, and then what you've got is actually a separation of the facts that you're looking for and the ability to do language. And that's really what we want to use a language model for. It's a large language model, not a large database model. So we're combining the ability to have given facts with a specific model that can then do stuff with those facts. And that means that you end up with this answer here. Now, this is a great story and it's useful for news organizations, but why is it interesting for legal? Well, everyone's heard about hallucinations. They're an inbuilt part of language models. Sadly, unless we change the paradigm, they're never going to disappear entirely. But what this means is that instead of relying on a gigantic kind of field of numbers between 0 and 1 to remember facts, we can use a database for them. And we can retrieve the relevant facts from that database before trying to answer questions. So it's a way of injecting a bit more factfulness into these models. And it also means that you can update that index of documents. You can keep adding those news stories. In the case of what we're interested, we can keep adding those new documents in and then hopefully pulling relevant information out about them. So the other question I should also address is, can't we just use context? And what a context is how much stuff one of these models can bear in mind at one time. How many different words can it hold in memory? How many different things can it think about? And that's been expanding. It's been expanding massively. And that, as I said, was from sentences to entire books to potentially, I saw a paper saying it's theoretically infinite. I don't particularly want to test it out on anything sensitive yet. But the number of things that we can think about at one time is useful. And we could use that. We could just put everything into one of these giant prompts every single time. But this goes again to this cost trade-off. We want to make sure this is something that people are happy to use and happy to build into ordinary workflows. And the reason that I want it to be built into ordinary workflows is because I want AI to be really, really boring in quite a lot of ways. The comparison I like to draw is with my car's engine. I don't really care that there's a series of explosions happening, thousands of times a minute, a couple of meters away from my feet. And that's amazing. Some people do get overexcited about this and watch Formula One and NASCAR and all the rest of it, but I don't have to care. It does what I need it to do. It does it efficiently, and it does it without me having to get overly worked up about it. So that's where I want us to get AI to. I want it to be as effective, and I want it to be as cost effective so that we don't have to worry about how it actually operates. So I'm handing back over to you, Greg.
Thanks. That leads us right into, into the slide. Some of the challenges that corporate legal comes across is really, the ROI side of things, the cost side of things. And when working with corporate legal departments, when they implement Legisway, different considerations come up. Obviously, AI can significantly reduce, the time spent on routine tasks, improve risk management, all of those great things, identifying risk, but how fast can we see those returns? How fast can we get that, back? Obviously, another couple challenges, let it be the integration or compatibility. And I think, with where we are in terms of cloud technology and just our hosting partners, it really streamlines that right into the compliance side of things and security side of things. What we do come across more often than I like, is, really skills gaps, training for those folks applying AI. And again, that kind of goes back to that hype cycle that I mentioned. What can it do? What can it do? Is it context? What answers can it give me? Do I give it, a broad range of information, or is it really, a small data set? And I think training is going to be really important for the folks applying, AI to contract management, for example, when reviewing contracts, being able to really identify, what are we really asking? What are we really looking for to get that out as fast as we can? In terms of benefits, efficiency, really speeding up the process. I think, when implementing Legisway Analyzer with a lot of our clients today, they want to see that efficiency, that productivity. They want to see those contracts, how fast they can get them processed. These become routine tasks, yes, but they carry weight. They're very important. And then, of course, it opens the door for strategic planning and decision making, right? You're helping your internal customers really speed up that process. You're optimizing operations and then reducing the risk. You have oversight, you have risk management, bird's eye view into any risks as it relates to, let's say, contract management, for example, is really an important factor that a lot of our clients see. And then, of course, overall cost reduction, giving you time back speeds up, the process on, let's call it operations management. Then you don't become a cost center, you become a strategic partner. And then I think I like to kind of joke around, but I say, you're the profit protector. You're making sure that there's nothing that we can't see coming. And if we need to dive in a little bit deeper because of a regulatory change, we can look at that information and we can use our system and review what's coming in the pipe or what's impacted based on that change. Now, Hugo, any other kind of benefits that you see from really pulling out what are they really getting out of it in terms of, I guess, benefit. That's all right. So one of the key components here, I think, from the Legisway perspective, is our Legisway analyzer. Intake and our AI will review the document by applying a set of checks that search or report, right? Data. We're having some connection issues. Can we see each other? Can everyone hear me? Wonderful. All right. Thank you. So just to confirm, in terms of Legisway Analyzer, intake and processing becomes really streamlined. Document management is really something that's an important factor for a lot of our clients when we implement Legisway. In terms of benefits, Hugo, can you touch on some of those from all the implementations and some of the clients that you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, so I think there's the pieces that we're relatively clear about. And one is that there is that streamlining of how you can get information into the system. One of the other ones that is a bit more abstract is actually peace of mind in some ways. So what we're thinking about is really what people worry about. And when you are running one of these departments, one of the kind of the lurking risks as a lawyer is that someone's agreed to something that they shouldn't have, and you don't know where that is or where it might be. And one of the things that this allows people to do is be able to get into that contract stack and find things, or at least check to see whether you think something is there. And there's a variety of techniques for doing this. So what we're trying to do, and the way that I like to think about this, is allow you to avoid that kind of sudden jolt of, oh dear, there might be something. And make sure that checking that isn't an exercise that requires paralegals' expense and time. You can get that initial search, that initial check done. And that kind of sense of security, we hope, is something that is quite valuable, and just means that then also, if something does happen, there's an ability to get to understand what obligations are for diverse things rapidly. So it's that assurance that you can find information fast that is an additional benefit to the kind of organizational ones that you might obviously think of.
Absolutely, that's a great point. A lot of the clients that I've worked with over the years in terms of implementing Legisway and some of the benefits, it's really, that constant flow of information becomes really important. Identifying those risks. I think within Legisway Analyzer specifically, that intake process, being able to apply a standard checklist or a third-party checklist, making that distinction, I think also speeds up things. And then again, just some of the images here I've captured really kind of identify, I have a brand new third-party document. I need to apply a particular checklist. I need to have a set of questions. And then in terms of those questions, I think prompts are the, kind of the same logic. If any of you have played with, ChatGPT or Gemini, I think those prompts, those questions really carry a lot of the result, that value that AI is going to push forward. And then, of course, capturing that data, making it searchable, making it reportable and visible, right, to you let it be on a particular matter or across matters and contracts in Legisway. Now, on the next slide here, I want to just talk about a little bit more how some of our clients have used the review and compare function, right? So Legisway Analyzer processes the document, processes the matter. You can use Analyzer for a quick contract review. Let it be for, on an existing matter, a renewal contract, an amendment to a contract. For a quick review, same logic, you're going to upload that one document and it's going to start comparing information. It's going to start looking at information that was maybe on the description, on the dates, on the clauses, on the dollar amounts, anything that may jump out at you right away. Of course, you can do your standard review manually, but I think from this perspective here, you're able to really get a view, identify potential any compliance issues or risks before they escalate, ensuring greater accuracy. Now, Hugo, in terms of kind of that quick review, going back and updating information, again, challenges, benefits here as well for clients that you've worked with over time.
Yeah, so on this one, it's the secret of AI is really UX, and that's that a lot of the time it's not trying to do something exciting and totally novel. Its real power lies in trying to make something that is either tedious or unpleasant a lot more palatable. And what we found with this is that you can have the folks who are entering data about sales contracts, be it the folks inside a legal department or maybe even sales agents, be a lot more diverse and accurate about what it is they're trying to put into contract lifecycle management systems. So instead of just going for those 5 basic data points, 5, 10 basic, you might look for a whole bunch more. And that means that the amount of data that people have just at their fingertips, that people are happy, that people have reviewed, is much greater. So the assistance here with this review and compare piece means that you can be relatively certain that you've got really good data sitting inside your database and that you can make decisions based on. And that's because people are much happier to make that extra effort to put the information in. And they're happy to do that because they're getting a good suggestion initially. They're not having to go through, do Control F, flick through the thing until they're getting the information that they need.
Absolutely. We come across many clients over the years, they have to dig into all of this data over and over again because they have long-term relationship with clients. And of course, with different changes, different agreements, different attorneys, inputting new data, being able to call that information out quickly. And, I want to go back to something you said. You want it to be a little bit more boring and more streamlined. And I think we want to be really just calling that out as well, right? This can get manual, this can get repetitive, but being able to quickly call out that information becomes valuable right away. And then again, it starts compounding on itself over time. We work with a lot of clients, again, kind of going back to that review and compare idea. We have folks that have standard paper, third-party paper. Well, that changes over time as well, right? So you may have had a relationship with a particular, vendor that you've been working with. Well, their paper changes just as much as anyone else's. You want to be able to call that out quickly. And then again, see those risks at a bird's eye view, at a quick compare view in a reportable fashion. That searching capability, that reporting capability within Legisway is really a major component our clients lean on, because then they can see, all right, well, I have this many contracts with this much risk. What's the dollar amount related to that? How can I pull that out and share that with the greater part of the business? These are components that we commonly see. So I'm going to move into the next slide here. And one of the key factors that I really love about Legisway Analyzer is kind of mass processing. Now, mass processing is really an analysis of a set of documents. Let it be a project that you have. Let it be an acquisition. We recently had a client come across a significant amount of legacy documents on someone's share drive that they forgot to file away. What they were able to do is use our mass processing tool. Essentially, they were able to log into Legisway, in the contract management module, create a project, upload those documents, apply a particular checklist, analyze them, retrieve the data. Of course, they could go through that data. Again, Reviewing a 200 contracts or even 10 contracts, 20 contracts is time. If you can speed up that process, create your matters, file away your documents, and then of course make it, very searchable and reportable, you're going to have a lot of value there. I think that key component of this processing data is I don't want to go back. What if I don't go back? What are the risks there? What am I leaving on the table? What am I not comparing? Right. So, Hugo, in terms of, folks processing data and a lot of this data using our AI tool, can you share some of those benefits that you've seen in your time?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're quite proud of, and I think it keeps us honest and on our toes, is that we've used this internally inside Wolters Kluwer, and this is not tens of documents, it's not hundreds of documents, it's hundreds of thousands of documents. And the concept that we like to think of is the contract landscape. And what this allows you to find is where are the slightly scary kind of fissures and canyons there that people haven't explored quite as much as they should. And it's, this is a substantial amount of work, and it's been made a lot easier. In fact, it might not even have been possible without using tools like this to actually get, to get that many documents into some kind of order. As you discover that different bits of the organization have, let's say, different filing practices, and that avoids me using curse words in terms of the quality of the data that they were previously storing.
It's definitely a consistent theme that I find, especially with, clients newly implemented. There'll be, a department, a silo somewhere where a collection of documents just lived, right? This was how we did business before, how we filed things before we had a solution. And commonly it'll pop up out of nowhere. You're in the middle of a project, you're doing your day-to-day, but this is metadata, this is documents, this is information that is valuable. And being able to quickly create a project, upload, analyze, and review, and then if needed, create the matters in Legisway, create the contracts in Legisway. Well, now you've updated all of that information quickly, right? You're not having to input and manually type in this information. The key component I hear is it's happening more often than not from our clients, where they'll come across this information where it was done in an old legacy way, someone filed it away or forgot about it, or on the other side of things, now there's a problem. We have some kind of compliance issue, right? There's a regulatory risk. There's something is escalating, and I need to be able to quickly analyze this data set, these documents. I can create that project, input that metadata, and then search, store, and report out on my findings. Comes in very handy, and a significant benefit, again, if you're dealing with a lot of documents, you've made an acquisition, and all of a sudden now you have to ingest all of their contracts and understand the relationship. Have you seen that come up before in your time, Hugo?
Yes, and our system has actually been used to assist with M&A due diligence on the law firm side. So it's a well-established use cases for finding those change of control clauses, finding the limitations of liability that the startup that you bought might have been very keen to sign, but now as a larger corporate, you might be less keen to have on your books and need to renegotiate or terminate. So yeah, let's say rationalization of contracts post an acquisition is something that we've seen a fair amount of previously. Also, the one wonderful example of what someone saying we're not exactly certain who all of our customers are, which was that's a separate end of the disorganized scale to the ones I hope you're used to dealing with, Greg.
Our clients are organized, yes, but sometimes things pop up. It's common where we start asking different departments for documents. How are you tracking that? This information today? Oh, it's in this share drive. Okay, well, let's dig into it. And then all of a sudden we identify new relationships, new contracts, new deliverables. Let there be, depending on your business, of course. So it becomes an important factor, and having that ability within Legisway to do it really compounds that value. And again, that ROI, because sitting there inputting 15, 20, 30 contracts, I'm sure, not a lot of folks have that, time available to them. Go ahead.
And it's also worth noting that, of course, trying to get legal professionals to do very, very, very repetitive work, and given the amount of time, effort, and care that's required to qualify, it doesn't seem like the best use of everyone's time.
Right. I mean, you want to be that strategic partner. You don't need to be focused on data entry. That's what we commonly hear. And that's really what we want to see from the legal ops perspective, or from the data management perspective in general. So definitely something that I like to focus on. I mean, we want to speed up the process. We want to create a self-service environment. But then we also have to have all the data in one place, and that single source of truth comes in handy, especially for Legisway and Legisway clients. Abilities within Legisway, and I think a very powerful one, even for those small legal departments. You could be an army of 1, 2, 3, 4, and Legisway provides an inbox for executed agreements. Really, stop cluttering up my inbox. I've got a laundry list of items there, but in terms of metadata and documents that need to be filed, Legisway has an AI function within Document Booker. Essentially, an email comes in, an administrator of the database or a manager of the database is able to come in and file, create an abstract, and attach the document in seconds. Now, this allows scalable operations, really, right? You may have a very flat, small legal department having one central source for folks to submit information into, provide context via email. Again, decluttering that inbox becomes extremely important, right? And you're able to kind of analyze this information, file it away, and keep moving throughout the day. And again, you're creating that single source of truth. As things grow, a lot of our clients tend to grow with us. They may expand beyond contracts and entity management to, let it be a real estate, IP, claims, and all of those things start compounding into really kind of managing that data set and really focusing on, removing those routine tasks and getting that transparency, that oversight, that risk management piece of it, moving into Legisway and getting clear line of sight. So in terms of kind of data management in general, Hugo, from folks inputting metadata manually, using AI, applying those features and functions, what do you think some of the quickest benefits for our Legisway clients, for example, are?
Yeah, so I think it goes to that. It really goes to that kind of understanding of what your landscape looks like. Everyone knows what the important things in their particular industry, in their particular area of expertise are. And it's that flexibility to make sure that you can pull out regularly the bits of contracts that worry you and make sure that you can track them, make sure you can go and find the relevant clause, the relevant section with minimal effort. That's really important, because we can try and pretend that we understand exactly how all this stuff should always operate. But if we're beginning to look at, let's take an example, commercial aircraft leasing agreements for engines. We need to understand from you folks exactly what the most important pieces are, and being able to make sure that you can track those service level agreements for connectivity for those turbines is really important, so that you can see the vital pieces.
In terms of capturing that data, I think Legisway does a wonderful job in not only offering configurations options to capture those vital pieces, but then pulling it into a report, automating that process, kicking off an alert based on a date range, right? Maybe there's a milestone date, a task, something of that nature that someone needs to complete or someone needs to review. That automation becomes really important. Legisway obviously is able to capture that. That searching, storing, and reporting on your data is a key component. That's really kind of the foundation that Legisway stands on. That's great that you have the information in the document, wonderful. Now you're able to populate that within the system quickly and easily using AI, and then of course rounding it out with being able to manage that data, manage that relationship that's coming up. So with that said, I've confirmation on my slides here. We've got a few questions in the chat. There's all sorts of talk about LLMs. Hugo, as simple as possible, what is a large language model? What do you see it as? Break it down in very simple terms. It's a big question, but I think it's an important one for us to touch on because it's used everywhere in every piece of marketing material that I see, and all the cool solutions have it. It's a really big buzzword.
Okay,
What does it really mean?
It's a big question, as you say, and
Right.
I like to think about it in the context of a children's game called Mad Libs. And that, for those who may or may not have encountered it, is one of the is you have a little story with a series of blanks, and kids, when they're younger, fill in those words with the blanks. And really, what an LLM is something that's really, really, really good at trying to either fill in the blank or say what the next word in a sentence is going to be. Now, that doesn't sound very powerful. That doesn't sound like a particularly useful piece of technology. But if you do this millions of times, billions of times, hundreds of billions of times, eventually a lot of things begin to fall out of your ability to do that. Because if I can say the cat sat on the blank mat, that's not that helpful. But if I said, Ed walked into the room last week and he blank on the chair, sat is probably the word. And that means that we've actually moved from just finding it's identified a verb. It's then got an idea of tenses and time. And if I asked, what the atomic number of hydrogen is blank, it's 1. And that means we're beginning to get a world model as well. So this is beginning just through this ability to pick what that next word should be, to understand grammar, semantics. It's got a factual matrix inside as well. And that means that you have something that has a rough understanding of language. It can take a sentence and be able to understand, and understand should probably be in air quotes there, what that sentence means. It can make a prediction about what is going to follow that sentence. And that means that you can do things with it. That means you can ask questions about contracts, and based on that contract, based on the question, it can then complete the answer to the question, if that makes sense, because the most likely answer to it is the correct one because of what you've shown it. So it means that you have this technology that can answer sentences and make predictions about what should happen next based on the information that it's seen. So it's a variety of things, but it shouldn't just be thought about as something that can chat to you. It's something that has a compressed understanding of the world just given to it by the language that it's seen previously. And that means that it can help out in this variety of different ways and based on those predictions. Hopefully, rant over. Let's see if that makes some sense for you folks.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a big question. It's a lot to kind of process, but I think, breaking it down in that game and then the repetition of it really becomes important, that learning, that teaching.
Yeah.
We did have another question come through. What would you say to lawyers who are concerned about the security when using AI?
Absolutely. And this is one of the other pieces that people are getting concerned about. So AI in general is a huge nebulous topic. What we need to think about here is enterprise AI. As we've seen, and people have been, I think they've had judicial reprimands from using it inappropriately. There's the security of the output and the security of the input. So let's start with the output first. The game that I said, the Mad Libs game, is probabilistic. It's not dealing in certainty, otherwise the AI wouldn't be able to make up these exciting things when it's asked to speculate. So that means that it's trying to persuade you that what it is coherent, that it's a valid sentence. That doesn't mean that it's linked to an authoritative data source if you're just using a standard LLM. Slight difference if you're using one of these retrieval augmented pieces that I talked about earlier, because there will be some reference text, but it can still make a mistake from reference text. It's not quite 1 + 1 = 2 all of the time. There's a little bit of uncertainty. So in terms of security of output, you have to be aware that there is this slight uncertainty about what you're dealing with. And then if it is bet the company kind of questions, you can have a suggestion and then it can be checked. It's about dealing with it on a risk-adjusted basis. Then we've got the inputs, and we had another question from Leon here that's addressing several of these points in, sadly, a bit more detail than we've probably got time for, and without one of my security specialists getting upset with me. So on the input side, it's really important that we're dealing with proper enterprise companies for enterprise and sensitive AI. We need to make sure that we've got the correct confidentiality agreements in place, otherwise privilege is suspect, which we do. We need to make sure that when we're using this access to the API-driven LLM, so the gigantic ones hosted by Microsoft or OpenAI, that we not only have an agreement that they will not train on our data, we also have the agreement that the inputs will not even be looked at for toxicity review, which is the standard for other pieces. So if you're dealing with us, if you're dealing with others, that is a question that should be asked. Can that toxicity review take place? Because again, does that mean it's privileged? No one wants to be the person fighting that court case to discover that it's not. So after we've done that, we then get to this point about training on inputs. And it's just being really careful and asking, do you, and we do not, train on the pieces of contracts for generative purposes? Are we going to allow someone else to be able to extract bits of your contract data set? And we don't. What we do for our learning is we don't use generative AI for that exact reason. We use extractive AI for quite a lot of the information extraction, because that means what it's trying to do is find a piece of text. It can't make it up in the same way that a generative AI can. And that's why when I was talking earlier that I was keen to kind of talk about this constellation of different models and using the correct model in that has the correct accuracy and the correct security focus for the correct task. Not just saying, okay, this GPT-4 thing sounds fun, let's use it for everything. So yes, people should always check with this technology, where's it going, who has control, and ask these questions. And they're exactly the right ones, and we're more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Hugh. That's helpful. I think the constellation approach is going to be really important as we kind of move it towards the future. I mean, we have another question here. What do you think about the future of the legal profession as it relates to AI? And I think I hear this often when we're talking about when we're chatting with some folks, the power users of our tool. And I can tell you that it's, from my perspective, it's a productivity tool. We like to call it the easy button. I like to process things faster, efficiently. I need to speed up these routine tasks. That's really kind of the future that I see. You're always going to need a human involved in the process. And I just want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think that there's a huge scope for quite an exciting expansion of what the legal profession can do, and importantly, who the legal profession can serve. There's, and I'm more familiar with this from the UK, but large amounts of access to law gaps at the moment. And that's not only for individuals, it's also for SMEs as well, where you don't have access to good quality answers for a lot of legal questions. Things that it would be lovely to go to counsel for that you can't because they're too busy doing what are probably lower value tasks. So the hope and the expectation is that with time, with better integration of these models into better data sources like Legisway, like high quality content, that we begin to be able to make a lot of this stuff a fair bit more efficient. And that should mean that there's going to be greater access to those augmented lawyers being able to do more stuff more accurately and faster. So I'm bullish on this, but I would be. And I'm quite excited by the opportunities here.
Absolutely. As am I. We're getting a lot of good feedback from the clients that have implemented Legisway on the AI capabilities and some of the applications of the existing features and functions. And that's only going to continue to grow as we kind of level out, I think. I just want to say thank you all for joining us today. Hugo, thank you for all of the information today. I'm going to pass it over back to Daniel to finish things up.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Hugo, for the presentation today. And with that, the webinar is now complete. To obtain a recording of the webinar, the link you received to log in today will be the same link that you will use for a playback of the webinar at a future date. And with that, Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you all again in another webinar soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.